And I will put it back out on the share with everybody else so you can see all the prior sessions. You know, we're going to switch to a flashcard review, so we're going to take the stress and the competition out of it. And some of you were worried about that. And you know, from this point forward, I would continue to follow recommendations. Once you can get a 95 on all the tests, the practice exams, you're probably ready for the test. You know, read some of the white papers, make sure you're writing down where you're scoped out at. That same process, by the way, for analyzing the questions still applies. What are the requirements? Is it asking for cost effective? Is it asking for scalability? Is it asking for cheapest? Like what are the words? What are the adjectives it's using to framing it? Sometimes, by the way, the requirements are what service? What service we're going to use? Second part is identifying the services that are used, right? Are they talking about S3, EC2? Like what are they talking about inside the whole space? Third is to eliminate the wrong answers. And the fourth is, you know, if you know the answer, do it. If you don't know the answer, then don't answer it, but mark it. And you're taking the real test. And then answer all the easy questions, go back and go through the ones that you marked. And you like have to not answer them. Because if you make a guess, typically your guess statistically is going to be the right answer. So if you don't know, just skip it for the time being, come back to it, mark it and come back to it at the end, and then take the time, because that takes the pressure off. Like you've gotten through the test, you've answered all the easy questions. Now you're working on the ones where you're like, it could be one of these two answers. Let me analyze this like in more detail and make sure that I know, you know, a little more thought around the whole thing. But don't overanalyze it. If you don't know, don't waste your time trying to figure it out. If you don't, then just go ahead and make a guess. And oddly enough, usually that guess will be right, especially if you've narrowed it down to two. So it's good. All right. So let's do some flashcards. All right. So what I'd like for you to do is I'm going to, you know, obviously here's a question like, what are the three major models of cloud deployment according to AWS? What I'd like for you to do is type in what you think the answer is so you can test yourself. What are the three major models of cloud deployment? How can you deploy to the cloud? What are the three models for that? Give you a hint. One of them could be private cloud. Good. Good. Got some answers. Excellent. Good. Now just to check, what do we call on-premise cloud? What is that? What is that cloud called? Good. Just to make sure that you know both names, right? Right. So it's on-premise cloud, also known as private cloud, hybrid cloud, and then just cloud, which is also known as public cloud. So actually those answers should be private, hybrid, and public. Those are really the three like best answers. But private is sometimes known as on-premise, and then just cloud is sometimes known as public, right? So it's really private, public, and hybrid. Good. Good, 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 good. All right. So Amazon's cloud computing resources and services are hosted in multiple locations worldwide and are meta clusters of data center clusters. So these are clusters of clusters. What are these clusters of clusters? What are these locations called globally? What does AWS refer to them as? They're not clusters of data centers, they're clusters of clusters. Because, yeah, good. Good, good, good. Seeing some good answers here. Seeing some answers. So they're regions. So remember, availability zones are clusters of data centers inside of a region. Clusters of clusters, meta clusters, like a collection of clusters, right? That's a region. So it's weird because you would think that they would just call it a data center, but that's not really the physical footprint. The physical footprint for an availability zone is it's actually a collection of data centers. That's a cluster. And when you take two of those, two collections of data centers, that's a meta cluster. And so what ends up happening is they call that regions. Unfortunately, it's not just two distinct locations, it's a bunch of different locations. So Good, 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 good. All right. By the way, I'm tracking this right now, and just want to say, well, we will reward you for participation. So thank you, really appreciate it. Appreciate you showing up and participating. All right. So Amazon's cloud computing resources and services are hosted in multiple locations worldwide and in meta clusters of data centers. Those locations called globally. We already did that. Okay. So what does AWS call one or more clusters of data centers that are partitioned, has independent failure zones within a typical metropolitan region? They have discrete UPS and on-site backup facilities and are network connection independent. What do they call those? Because that's just a cluster of data centers. What is that? Good. So if a meta cluster of clusters is a region, then just a cluster of data centers is just an availability zone. And they are fault tolerant, they are UPS backed, they are network independent. So it's perfect. Go. Oh, hold on. Did I actually show you that? I probably didn't. Availability zones. For example, US East 1A, US East 1B example, those are all availability zones. Okay, good. What is one of the 4 possible reasons that you choose one AWS region over another region? So Keith, by the way, a group of availability zones is called a region. Ah, good. Yeah, some good answers there. Yeah, that's great actually. That's right. There we go. Yep, proximity. So basically, one of the 4 reasons is like data governance, like I need to be in the United States or I need to be outside of the United States. I've heard that a lot. Proximity customers, which is the reason that a lot of you gave, like latency, for example. The service availability. So, for example, some services are not available in every region, especially the newer ones. And then costs, because, like, for example, Tokyo and California tend to be about 10 to 30% more expensive than any other region on the same continent or in the same area of the world. So, yeah, good. All right, so what is the name of the global network that certain Amazon services use to distribute your data on request only, by the way, so that it may be close to the end user or customer? Each location acts as a cache or compute repository to host either files, API calls, or other services. Some of you gave the answer to that in other questions, which I think is great because at least it's on your mind. So it's not availability zones, it's not regions, but what is the name of that global network? There's actually, you can name the service or you could name what those locations are. Either one is fine. So yeah, edge locations, so good there. Or CloudFront. I think CloudFront is also a legitimate answer because that is CloudFront. CloudFront is one of the services that use that, but it was the first service, just to mention that. Then DNS was a fast follower, and then now that we've got like all this stuff, Lambda Edge and Global Accelerator, right? So yeah, there's a bunch now. Okay. Good, 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 good. All right. Oh, did I answer that? I didn't. Edge locations, points of presence, right? You could also, I think, refer to the service. CloudFront is one of the services. Okay. What kind of storage is the simple storage service? Is S3? Is it block, object, file, network, or archival storage? So, and let me give you some definitions. So block storage gets mounted directly onto an operating system. Object storage is manipulated through an API. File storage is mounted typically across a network, so it's very similar to network storage, but it's off of files, right? Archival storage is used for long-term compliance and retention. So there are actual software systems that can be all four, like Ceph, CEPH, can actually mimic all four of those systems, but S3 is actually only block storage. So block storage is what S3 represents. I'm sorry, did I say block? I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with me. It's object storage. So S3 can't be mounted as a file system, it can't be shared out as a file system, and S3 is not archival storage. So block, file, and network all get mounted as file systems, which S3 cannot do. S3 can only be accessed through an API. So since it can only be accessed through an API, whether that or a web URL as a result, right? Since it can only be accessed through that medium, it is definitely object storage, also known as application storage. So, but it's not block, it's not file, it's not network, and it's definitely not archival. There is a flavor, just as a bonus question, there is a flavor of S3 that is archival storage. Does anyone remember what that's called? It's really, really cold storage. Yeah, good. Good, good, good. All right. All right. So here's a good one. This one's tough, by the way. This is like the $500 questions right here. If your bucket is named Super Troopers, which by the way is an awesome bucket name, what would be the URL for your S3 bucket minus the HTTPS? Like what would the bucket name be? I'm getting some funny answers. It's good. So there's actually two formats for this, but this is the primary one. Super Troopers, which is basically bucket name.s3.amazonaws.com. Weird, right? Because it's amazonaws.com. It's not aws.com or amazon.com. It's bucket name.s3.amazonaws.com. That's one version of it. There's another version. This is the generic one that they ask that you use. Good. All right. Okay, if I enable versioning, almost like enable like a versioning within like a Word doc, for example, what does enabling version on an S3 bucket, what does it actually do with objects in that bucket? What specific action? What is it? When you turn on versioning, what happens inside of a bucket? To answer your question, Greg, yes, it will be named that by default. That'll be the default name. So some people said creating a copy, which is accurate, right? Creates an in-place copy, so you get different versions of a file, right? So that's accurate. So it basically allows you to recover objects from accidental deletion or overwrite, because every time you make a change to the file, a complete copy of the file is created. So if you have a 1 gig video file and someone goes in and changes the metadata, you now have that thing eating 2 gigs. If someone goes in and then adds like a second of recording to the end of it, you now got a 3 gig file. It's like every time you make a change to the file, it makes a new version of it, right? File size can go up and down, but typically it makes a complete copy of the previous version. So it's good. In order to delete it, by the way, you have to delete all the versions, including the deletion marker, which is the delete piece, right? So you actually have to explicitly go in and delete all the versions. Okay, here we go. What type of storage is S3 Glacier? Is it block, file, network, or archival storage? Good deal. There we go. Yeah, that's good across the board. Excellent. So that's archival storage. Perfect. So it's archival and compliance. By the way, they do have a new version of Glacier called Deep Dive, which is even apparently colder. So how far are we going to go with that? Next time it'll be Kelvin. It'll be 0 degrees. That'll be the next one. All right, so this is a hard one, by the way. This is a $500 question. So rank each storage tier from hottest, meaning most accessible, to coldest, which means rarely accessed. So you've got S3 one zone infrequent access. That's a mouthful, right? S3 standard, Amazon Glacier Deep Archive. Right? That's one thing. S3 standard infrequent access. So you've got S3 one zone infrequent access, and you've got S3 standard infrequent access, and you've also got S3 standard. So if you were to rank those from hottest to coldest, which one goes to the top? Which one is the hottest, most available, fastest storage here? Because we're pretty sure it's not Glacier, because that sounds cold, doesn't it? So that's exactly right. So it's S3 standard, S3 standard infrequent access, S3 one zone infrequent access, and then Glacier basically as the last one, right? The reason, by the way, like you might say, well, they're both infrequent access. Why is one zone slower than standard infrequent access? Because when you do reads, you actually pull it from 3 places. So you've got 3 engines when you do infrequent access. You only got one zone. Not only is it less redundant, but it's actually slightly less performant as a result. So it's actually colder, right? So good. Let's see. Greatest to say that was absolutely dead on. Just take the one zone and move it after the S3 standard infrequent, and you've got it in perfect order. So you were just missing one little piece. So it was S3 standard, one zone, and then S3 standard one zone infrequent, and then Glacier. So you almost had that perfect. Good. Good. Good, good, good. Oh, wait. I guess I should show you that. standard, and then standard one zone. Yep, there we go. So that's exactly what I said. Okay, this is a gimme. This is an easy one. You got this one. What is the name of Amazon's virtual machine service? I feel like some people are like, do I really need to answer this? I know this already. So this is EC2 or Elastic Compute Cloud, right? Sometimes it's depicted as an EC like squared, right? So, all right, good, 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 good. All right, all right. So, okay, so now, so we're kind of on, like we were on a topic before. We were on networking, physical infrastructure. Then we were on S3. Now we're on EC2. So each EC2 instance, each virtual machine must boot with this specific operating system snapshot. What is the name of this snapshot, this Amazon unit that's used for booting different EC2 operating systems? What do we call that snapshot? There's a 3-letter name for it. So I'll give you a hint. It's a 3-letter word. It starts with Amazon blank blank. Okay, it's Amazon Machine Image, or AMI. That's what we call them for short. Good, 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 good. All right. What is the name, the AWS name, for the service that attaches virtual hard drives to EC2 instances? When you need to attach a hard drive to EC2, what is the name of that? So it's one of the few services that requires another service for you to access, and it's called dun, 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 the Elastic Block Store, or EBS. Don't get that confused with Elastic Beanstalk, which we never shorten. It's not called EB, right? This is the Elastic Block Store. This is block storage, which means it's a virtual hard drive that gets attached to your virtual machine. And so the two are like peanut butter and chocolate. You've got EC2 over here, and it's all chocolatey, and you've got EBS, which is all peanut buttery, and you just bring them together. Together, you have a complete virtual machine. So, all right. Name either one of the two AWS network file share services that allow you to share a single file system through the network, so over the network, with multiple EC2 instances. What is the name of that network file share? Oddly enough, one starts with an E, the other one starts with an F. One is for Windows primarily, and the other one is for Linux primarily. Yes. So there's two options. One, either EFS or FSX for either Windows or Lustre, and oddly enough, Lustre can actually be used by either operating system, but Windows, FSX for Windows is exactly what it sounds like. It's for Windows. The Elastic File Share, by the way, is the oldest. It's been around for a long time. That's really for Linux. That's NFS, right? But FSX or EFS, either one of those answers would have gotten you there. Good. Name any of the pretty much 4 pricing models that you can use when you request an EC2 instance. Any of them. Just to be clear, not the support models, but the pricing models for EC2 instances. The answer is on-demand, reserved, or spot instances. You may also have said dedicated, and you would have been right. Dedicated is the most expensive. On-demand is the second most expensive. Reserved is the second cheapest, and spot is like spot can be way cheap. Spot can be up to 90% off according to AWS. All right. Okay, so now we're on to data stores. What is the name of the AWS service to use when you need a traditional RDBMS system like Oracle Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server, MariaDB, or MySQL? What is the 3-letter acronym for that special RDBMS service? All right, going once, going twice. The answer is RDS. The relational database service. RDBMS is covered by RDS. Good. By the way, sometimes they refer to Aurora as a separate product. Aurora is really a subsection of RDS. It's even, you even find it that way on the console. So I don't know why they do that, but it is. Oh, by the way, just to mention this, so this will blow your mind. So when you use RDS, traditionally you have to assign what they call DB instances, where they're really just EC2 instances underneath your database. They now have serverless Aurora. So you can get Postgres and MySQL and you don't pay for servers. You only pay for queries. That's super cheap because most relational databases just sit there unless they're under peak load and engaged. So it's pretty cool. All right. So what's the name of the AWS NoSQL service that is fully managed, has on-demand scaling, and delivers seamless throughput in a schemaless and dynamic table format? This is their flagship NoSQL service. There was a paper written in 2001 on it. It inspired an open source database called React. What is the name of Amazon's flagship DynamoDB? Wow, look at that. I got several answers there. Good. Well done. Well done. Perfect. Good timing. Love that. Okay. I just mentioned it. In which two database engines does Aurora off comparability? I'm sorry, that should say compatibility. We're going to let that slide for a second. That should say compatibility, right? Which two flavors? Remember, this is a subset of RDS, so it's going to be it's going to be 2 of the 5 flavors that RDS covers. What are those flavors? So your choices are Oracle, MS SQL, MariaDB, MySQL, and Postgres. All right. Survey says it's Postgres and MySQL. Well done. So Postgres and MySQL are basically probably the 2 of the most popular open source engines out there for RDBMSs. And so that's it. Those are the 2. All right. Okay. A little bit of a storage question. What is the name of the AWS family of appliances that can be requested and used at your local data center to transfer large amount of data that would be unfeasible over a network connection? So think of this as like you're able to bring something into the data center that can copy data, you can copy data to. There's many different sizes and flavors of this. What is the name of this AWS appliance? So you order it online and it's delivered to your like office location. They just came out with a new version of it, by the way, which is now like a small form factor, which has compute power in it, which really blew my mind. It's called Snowball. They've got the Snowball, Snow Cone, Snowmobile, but they're all part of the Snowball family. So good. Good. Name 3 of the databases that the AWS Database Migration Service supports. This is a higher level question. Could be, by the way, remarkably similar to some of the technologies that were mentioned earlier. Good. Seeing some good answers here. All right. So you can use any of the RDBMSs, Oracle, Postgres, SQL Server, even Redshift, by the way, Aurora, which of course has two flavors, MariaDB and MySQL. So any of those will function, any of those three, as long as they're an RDBMS. NoSQL, which is like MongoDB and graph databases and DynamoDB and Cassandra, are harder to do because there's no fixed structure to the data sets. So that's really hard to do migration for from one technology to the next. But RDBMSs all follow a structured query language. So they all have tables, relations, constraints. They all follow pretty much the same thing. So it has to be an engine that will support SQL right now. There'll be more later that will support different ones. Good. Okay, now we're off of databases because that was like the high level question. What does VPC stand for in the world of AWS? So we're on to some more networking. Good. Excellent. Just checking in. Everybody can hear me okay? Everyone's good? Okay, good. So what does VPC stand for? It stands for Virtual Private Cloud. All right. Next one. True or false? VPCs can span more than one region. True or false? Let's see. I got one true. I got two trues. Got three trues. All right. Oh. VPCs can span more than one region. Unfortunately, VPCs cannot span more than one region. VPCs are limited to one region and one region only. They can span multiple availability zones, but they can't span more than one region. So they got the whole region because they can span more than one availability zone, but they can't go across regions, like to another region. So okay, here's another question of a similar type. True or false, subnets can go across multiple availability zones. They can span availability zones. Is that true or false? So just like VPCs cannot span more than one region, but they can span availability zones, subnets can only live in one availability zone and one only. So they cannot go across multiple availability zones. They have to live in one availability zone and one only. That's why if you want to go into multiple availability zones, you have to have a subnet for each of those availability zones, because the subnets will not go across all of it. VPCs will, but subnets will not. So yeah, so that's false. Okay, so how do these things get reworded? What networking component has to be connected to a subnet in order to make it a public subnet? So what networking component that's in a VPC has to be connected to a subnet to make it a public subnet? So in order for something to be connected to the public subnet, it's got to be connected to the internet. In order for that to happen, you have to have an internet gateway. Now, if you want it to be connected to a customer network, you have to go through a customer gateway. So it's different. Customer gateway is like for VPN stuff, right? So an internet gateway. So the internet gateway, by the way, is a horizontally scalable, redundant, and highly available VPC component that allows communication between VPCs and the internet. All right. Okay, this is a high level question. What is the name of the networking interface service and static IP address service that can be requested and attached to EC2 instances? This one's tough. But you gotta remember, what's Amazon's favorite word when they name services? That could help. Remember, this can be requested and attached to an EC2 instance. What kind of thing can be attached to an EC2 instance? We got hard drives, but we're on networking. So what can be attached from a networking perspective to an EC2 instance? This one's hard. It's not easy. Survey says the answer is an elastic network interface, an ENI, or an EIP. Either answer would have been fine. An elastic IP or an elastic network interface. Now that one was difficult. Okay, now we're out of networking. We've moved on. Now we're on to like users, groups, roles, that kind of thing. So what is the name of the AWS service that grants users, groups, and roles permissions to access and use AWS services? What is the three-letter acronym for that service? Answer is dun, 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 Identity Access Management, or the IAM service. Good, 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 good. Okay, what is the name of the stateful? These are all security services, by the way. What's the name of the stateful firewall service that surrounds each EC2 instance? What is the name of that firewall that surrounds the EC2 instance? Not the network, not the subnet, but it surrounds and protects the EC2 instance itself. What is the name of that? All right, this one's hard. So good guess, right? So this is the security group. Security group is a stateful firewall that surrounds each EC2 instance. And you can have multiple EC2 instances in a security group, but what it does is it acts like a stateful firewall. So it's usually the first and last line of defense for an EC2 instance. If it doesn't say that you can get to the instance, the security group is the firewall that usually stops it. All right, almost there. We only got 3 questions left and we're done. Okay, so what is the name of the AWS service that puts a stateless firewall at the boundary, at the subnet boundary in your VPCs? What is that? What's the stateless firewall that surrounds the subnet? So it's not a security group because we just covered that one. What's the name of the other firewall in AWS? I'm seeing some good guesses actually. Someone just wrote the Great Wall of AWS. That's pretty good actually. Yeah, and I'm seeing some legitimate possibilities like Shield and Web Application Firewall, but unfortunately none of those are really like full like stateless firewalls. So what we're talking about here on the subnet boundary is a network access control list, or a NACL, right? That's the other option. Okay. Next to last question. True or false? Security groups allow all traffic in by default. Is that true or false? So by default, security groups do not let any traffic in. So it is 100% true that they deny all traffic by default, but this is false, right? They do not allow all traffic in by default. They block all traffic by default. That's what security groups do. So what happens is that the network access control list just allows everything by default to come in and out, but the security group denies everything. So if you want to have your instances show up on the internet, or like web servers or whatnot, or SSH, you have to go into the security group and allow traffic. But by default, they blocked traffic. So this is false. But what's interesting is that outbound traffic isn't blocked, inbound traffic is blocked. So your instance can go patch itself, but the internet can't find your instance, which is awesome. So, all right, last question. True or false? You can chain security groups together so that security group A will only allow traffic from security group B, and that security group B will only allow traffic to C. Can you embed security groups in your security groups? Going once, going twice. And the answer is that you can actually embed security groups inside of security groups. So you can make it so that your database server only accepts traffic from the application server. The application servers will only accept traffic, right, from the web servers, and so on and so on. You could, that's all day long. It'd be awesome. So good. That's the last question. So good deal. All right. So I mean, I just got to tell you, it's neck and neck there for a while. There's only 4 points difference between the winner and the person who came in second and third place. And the winner for tonight is Brendan, right? 4 points in the lead. Excellent. But it was neck and neck. You guys were right there on top of each other. It was awesome. So good job. Sarwar, you also did excellent. And Greg, you did well as well. I'm kind of, you were right in there. You're doing great. That's perfect.
Can you Can you ask Brendan what email address he would like us to use to send his Amazon gift card to?
Yes, Brendan.
Just did ask Brendan,
I,
so you heard me. So
yeah.
email it to either myself or Michael. You might have my email somewhere, but I know you have Michael's for sure.
All right. Thank you. I can't believe I won that. There was a couple that I knew I made the wrong answer.
Yeah, no, you
And I
did
did it.
good. Star War, you were in there too. It was so close. That was good. It was really, really good. Good,
So how
good,
many
good.
people did we have in the end this last session?
So let's see. We have Brendan, Francis, Gregory, Jason, Keith, and Star Wars. So we, including yourself, we had 6. So
Okay.
yeah, it was good. All right. So it's 8:23. We've got a few minutes. So does anyone have any questions? You want questions about the exam, questions to study for, things, tips and tricks, anything that you want to know, anything you want to like ask? It's kind of open-ended, a little, right, can be a little uncomfortable, but like anything that you want to know or ask about, anything you want to clarify around either the cloud practitioners or pretty much any test or question that you might have around AWS.
Also, would be interested if anybody has any feedback on the sessions, what you liked, what you didn't like, what we could do better. Michael's done these a lot before. We kind of improvised a little bit with the Jeopardy game and things like that, but curious if anybody had any feedback. And you can email it independently, whatever you'd like to do. But of course, we hope you enjoyed it. But certainly any feedback for improvement would be great.
Yeah.
I'd like to certainly thank Michael for doing these for us, because I've found it helpful to carry on with studying and continue just beating through it. I find the biggest challenge is really just deciphering the question, and I don't profess to have all the inner knowledge of AWS to answer it, but just to capture what the question's really even trying to attract to, like even some of your true false questions, just a little bit tricky,
Yeah.
Maybe a strategy on how you prepare for interpreting their logic. That might be helpful.
Yeah, so in I think it was session 2, and actually I just had one of the students that I probably mentioned this before. I have a couple people from AWS who I'm coaching to take the exams because they have to take all the exams, like they are required, right? And one of them was regurgitating back to me the same strategy that I shared with you guys in the second session, which was number 1, identify what the requirements are asking. Like for example, is the question asking which service to use? Is it asking which is the most scalable option, which is the best performing option? It's usually an ility, like reliability, scalability, right? High availability, like it's asking something like that. And so you have to identify first what they want. Do they want the cheapest option? Do they want the most performing option? Because those are wildly different answers typically. So the first thing you do is you identify requirements. This, by the way, is in our notes for the Google Drive in case you need to see it. Second is then sometimes you figure out what services are they talking about. Now, sometimes that's the answer. Like if they're like, okay, which service is going to be like the best object store that you can use to like get high speed distributed? It's like, oh, well, that's S3. So that is the answer. So you don't need to figure out what service they're talking about because that's the answer to the question. But if they're like, hey, we're using S3 and we want to know which of these options is going to be the most highly available, your first requirement is that you need the most highly available option and the service they're talking about is S3. And so in your mind, you got to figure out what the requirement is, what service they're talking about, and then usually the next thing you do is you eliminate wrong answers. So you go in and you're like, okay, wait, you want to hook up a subnet to make it public? Well, the virtual private gateway isn't going to work because that's for VPN. And they'll say like something like workdocs. Well, workdocs is not even used for networking, so that's out. And so what ends up happening is you end up with 2 answers left, and then you analyze and make sure like, okay, well, it's probably going to be internet gateway because to make a subnet public, you've got to connect it to the internet, so it's going to be internet gateway, right? So you follow that. First, identify the requirement. They're asking for like cost effective, most performance something. Second is identify the service. Third is eliminate the wrong answers right off the bat. And fourth is go back and look at which of the answers is technically the most appropriate. And that's usually the process that we follow is to figure that out. And I actually had the guy with me tomorrow who's taking the solutions architecture exam. He actually regurgitated the thing back at me. which I thought was awesome that he remembered that. But that's like the best strategy for breaking down the questions. And by the way, surprisingly, eliminating wrong answers will actually get you many times down to 2, and then you just need to really look at what the differentiators are. Especially when the questions are identical, the answer is probably going to be in the questions that are similar, and so you just need to figure out what the distinctions are. And they'll throw you off, by the way. For example, SSH, is that a TCP protocol or is that UDP protocol? Well, it's like silly questions like that that they'll catch you on, but that's just to mention that's for solutions architecture. For Cloud Practitioner, they don't really go into that much detail. But requirements, service, eliminate wrong answers, then distinct which one is the best answer. So yeah, that's the best way to do it. Star Wars was asking me, said, I completed the practice exam 1. Will exams 2, 3, and 4 cover the same subjects or chapters? It actually will be different material. Same subject, but different questions. So John Bonzo actually has, I never say this word correctly, it's like an eidetic memory or eidetic memory, and he can recall like a true photographic memory. He can like see the whole thing. And so, and Amazon's aware of this, by the way, so he's not doing anything illegal. But he's rewritten the questions to make it so that he's not infringing on anyone's copyright, but he basically has these questions like set up. So it's really good. And so it's the questions for all the exams he's taken, but in different orders, and they're totally different questions. So none of the questions that you saw in exam 1 will show up on exams 2, 3, and 4 as far as your practice exams go. And I had somebody complain to me and he said, well, I've taken this stuff and I've done the hands-on labs and I've taken the practice exam so many times, I think I've memorized the answers. And my response to him was, who cares, right? You just memorize the proper answers, the rights, the wrongs, the whys, the why nots for what is it, 65 questions times 4. So that's 260 questions that you don't have the answer to. And it was a little bit like one of those moments where you've ever seen like the Karate Kid and he's like, why am I waxing on? Why am I waxing off? And the guy's like throwing a punch and he's like blocking it instinctively. It's like, I was talking to him and I said, okay, so what's the S3 service that, governs like, cold storage? And he's like, Glacier. Okay, I said, great. How many 9s of durability are there on S3? And he's like, 11. I was like, how did you know that? He goes, because I memorized it from the practice exams. I was like, yeah, but that's real knowledge. You now have real knowledge about AWS and how it's supposed to work. So who cares if you memorize the answers? And as long as you know the why it's the right answer, you just gain knowledge about how the system is supposed to work. Now, I don't recommend that if you haven't taken a class, because otherwise it's a paper certification. You got to be comfortable doing stuff. But for people who have taken the class and done the labs, I say go for it. Memorize the junk out of those questions, because it's real AWS knowledge. It's real understanding of how the system's supposed to work. So it's not a waste. Cool. Well, I just ranted 1 minute over our time. So does anyone have any final questions, comments? Anyone got my contact information? I put it in there. It's michael.forrester@webhsolutions.com. And if you need additional help or whatever, just let me know if you get stuck in particular. And I would love, Greg and I would both love to hear you passing the exam. So let me know when you get there, when you pass it. We'd love to celebrate your success with you. So any other questions or comments before we close?
Just thanks everybody for joining, and thanks Michael for facilitating. It was fun.
My absolute pleasure. All right, everyone. It's been 6 great weeks, 5 sessions. Awesome. Go forth, conquer it. Let me know when you win. And Brendan, make sure you send us your email address. Otherwise, we will catch you all at the next session. So thank you so very much.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys. Good night.
Good night.